Paolo Macchiarini was becoming a superstar in the medical field. His groundbreaking research on regenerative medicine led to creating a so-called miracle surgery that was supposed to save countless lives. Meanwhile, he was planning his dream wedding, which was to be officiated by Pope Francis and attended by the Obamas and Vladimir Putin. He had it all, and his rapid rise to fame was just the beginning. There was just one problem. None of it was real. Everything Macchiarini had achieved was founded on nothing but utter deception. There was no miracle surgery and no celebrity wedding guests, just an endless web of lies spun through every aspect of his life. His colleagues, his patients, and family were hoodwinked by his scams, and people died because of it. How did Macchiarini make millions of dollars and become a celebrity off his web of lies? The epic rise and fall of Dr. Macchiarini began back in 1986. Paolo had just graduated from school, having earned the Italian equivalent of a Doctor of Medicine degree from the University of Pisa in Italy. He earned his Master of Surgery from Pisa in 1991, which he received during a 2-year stint as an assistant professor at the university. His pursuit of higher education didn't stop there, though. In 1997, he received a doctorate in organ and tissue transplantation. Both certificates came from the University of Franche-Comté in France. His credentials were impressive, and they earned him immediate work in the field. In 1999, he became the head of thoracic and vascular surgery at Heidehaus Hanover Hospital in Hanover, Germany. He held this position until 2004, and just 2 years later, he began working as an investigator at the Institute of Biomedical Investigations in Barcelona, Spain. He also worked at the hospital in Barcelona, putting the expert medical knowledge he had gained over decades into practice. As Paolo was coming up in the medical field, he started conducting extensive research into regenerative medicine, which focuses on restoring damaged tissues and organs to normal working order by manipulating the body's natural repair functions. His main interest was finding a way to heal people with irreparable tracheal damage. The trachea, more commonly known as the windpipe, is a tricky body part to navigate for a surgeon. It's the organ responsible for the passage of air from the throat into the lungs, so one wrong move can have deadly consequences for the patient. Paolo wanted to create trachea transplants for those who needed them to survive. He was the who's who of regenerative science, and his research turned heads in the medical community. However, there was skepticism about whether Macchiarini could produce the revolutionary transplants he sought. In 2008, he proved those skeptics wrong. All that painstaking research paid off, and he was ready to operate. The patient was Claudia Castillo, a young mother from Barcelona. Due to complications from tuberculosis, Castillo's left lung had collapsed, and she was in dire need of immediate help. Enter Dr. Macchiarini, whose research had led him to formulate a miracle procedure that targeted defective tracheas. The innovative surgery would seed stem cells from Castillo's body with a synthetic trachea that would replace her biological one. It was a risky proposition, but Castillo didn't have many other options. Macchiarini insisted that his research suggested the surgery would be successful and that Castillo would make a full recovery. In June of 2008, Castillo officially went under the knife. Macchiarini and his team used a donated trachea that was removed from a cadaver at the University of Padua in Italy. As crazy as it sounds, the procedure transplanted that trachea into Castillo's body, and it was now the only thing keeping her alive. It seemed like everything had gone according to plan, and Macchiarini was heralded as nothing short of a hero. His wild idea to take a trachea straight from a medical school cadaver and put it in someone's body had somehow worked, and he had saved a life because of it for now. His experimental procedure disrupted the common consensus regarding what was and wasn't possible in the realm of regenerative medicine, and it earned him a spot at one of the most prestigious medical schools in the entire world. In 2010, Macchiarini was invited to join Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, serving as a visiting professor and part-time surgeon at the university hospital. For those unaware, the people who work as part of the Karolinska Institute's network of medical professionals represent the cream of the crop in the medical field. The university's Nobel Assembly, which consists of 50 Karolinska professors, is the committee responsible for selecting Nobel Prize winners for medicine. Paolo Macchiarini was now working among those elite individuals. It was all thanks to his groundbreaking trachea surgery, which he had now performed on multiple patients. The lucky recipients of his donor tracheas included a 10-year-old boy from Ireland born with a trachea that was just 1 millimeter wide, a dying woman in Russia, Macchiarini worked with Russian surgeon Vladimir Pershin to help heal her. Paulo continued to lay roots in Russia, giving a masterclass in 2010 at the behest of Russian politician Mikhail Batin. His Russian ties saw him appointed at Cuban State Medical University, one of the oldest medical schools in Russia. In 2011, he was granted money by the university and the Russian government to conduct a special research project. He also received an honorary doctorate from Cuban State, yet another certificate to add to his impressive collection. Later in 2011, Macchiarini exploded into the public eye. While he had already established himself within the international medical community, he had not yet become a household name to the rest of the world. That was about to change. Macchiarini and his medical team conducted another trachea transplant in June of 2011. This one, a little different from his previous procedure. Instead of using a donor trachea to operate, Macchiarini collaborated with scientists at University College London to produce a synthetic trachea of their own design, which would allow them to tailor it more closely to the patient's specific needs. After a successful surgery, the story blew up, garnering Macchiarini a front-page spotlight in the New York Times. For the next 3 years, Macchiarini continued to perform his innovative trachea transplants on various patients worldwide. In total, 17 individuals received Macchiarini's plastic trachea, and his growing stature in the medical field had helped him blossom into a genuine celebrity. He caught the attention of important figures at one of America's biggest television networks, NBC, including TV personality Meredith Vieira. Vieira wanted to make a documentary highlighting Macchiarini's trailblazing medical research and the many lives he was supposedly saving through his work. She spearheaded the creation of a Dateline special called Leap of Faith, which centered around Macchiarini's extraordinary accomplishments. While the piece was still in production, Macchiarini became romantically involved with one of the doc's producers, Benita Alexander. Alexander committed one of the cardinal sins of journalism, fell in love with the subject of her story. But their courtship persisted all the same. What began as a secret affair between a producer and the larger-than-life subject of her documentary evolved into a very real, very passionate relationship. The couple fell in love. By the time A Leap of Faith premiered in 2014, the wedding bells were officially ringing for Macchiarini and his now fiancée. They prepared for an extravagant celebration that would rival the royal wedding. World leaders like the Obamas and Vladimir Putin would be in attendance. Italian opera singer Andrea Bocelli would perform the music. World-renowned Italian restaurant Enoteca Pinocchiori would cater the event. The cherry on top of the wedding cake was his claim that Pope Francis would officiate the wedding. How exactly was Macchiarini able to pull it all off? He had supposedly become the personal doctor for all these famous individuals. No one questioned him on it, not even his bride-to-be. Macchiarini had such an intoxicating aura to his personality that it was hard not to be swept up by his grand persona. However, as the wedding day approached, that persona started to split at the seams. The towering house of cards Macchiarini had built for himself began its epic collapse. As it turns out, nearly everything that was known about Paulo Macchiarini was untrue. He had hidden the truth beneath the endless stream of lies that encompassed his entire life, both personally and professionally. For starters, he was not the personal doctor of any of the high-profile individuals he claimed to be associated with. He had never met the Obamas, never crossed paths with Putin, and never treated the Pope. The spokesman for Pope Francis said that he had never heard of anyone by the name Paulo Macchiarini, and he wouldn't have agreed to officiate his wedding anyway, as he doesn't condone the act of remarriage. That's right, Paulo had already been married to another woman for 30 years. The couple had children together. Macchiarini's new fiancée had been kept in the dark about his secret family. Had she known he had a wife and kids, she would have never initiated their romance in the first place. But Macchiarini intended to lead a double life, a responsible husband and father in one breath, a slick bachelor looking for love in another. His entire life was predicated on the elaborate deceptions he fabricated. He tried to have his cake and eat it too. In the end, he was left with no family at all. The disintegration of his fractured personal life only the beginning of the end. More and more of Macchiarini's lies came to light. Questions regarding the legitimacy of his famed miracle surgery arose around this time as well. His patients had all recovered reasonably well in the months that followed their operations. Many of them developed additional health complications as time passed, complications that stemmed directly from their trachea transplants. 7 of the people that Macchiarini operated on actually died. Macchiarini was content to chalk their demise to the patient's existing health problems rather than anything related to his transplants. Other professionals in the medical field felt differently. The medical community closely scrutinized Macchiarini's research on regenerative medicine once his patients started dying. What they found were severe inconsistencies and, in some cases, outright lies riddled throughout the research documents Macchiarini had written over his career. He had falsified a number of the claims he made to fast-track his experimental surgery before it could properly be examined. He knew that it would never be greenlit under normal circumstances, so he bent the truth to get his way. He didn't care about the fatal consequences such as reckless medical malpractice would have on his patients. He just wanted the fame and fortune that came with making such a groundbreaking discovery. Nothing else mattered. For a while, his ruse was working, but a lie this big will always come to light. Something scammers, cheats, and liars never realize till it's too late. It's easy to pin the passings of Macchiarini's patients on the celebrity surgeon himself, and the majority of the blame certainly belongs on his shoulders. Let's not overlook the people that enabled his gross negligence along the way. He had been permitted to join the vaunted Karolinska Institute back in 2010, even though he had several references that spoke poorly of him in his research practices. He had even falsified some of the credentials that appeared on his resume. Macchiarini's tendency to cut corners wasn't anything new by the time he was cooking up his phony trachea surgery. He had always tried to take the easy route, up until the body started dropping. He was allowed to. The whole charade led to changes at the top of the Karolinska Institute. The secretary of the university's Nobel Assembly resigned in 2016 due to his strong support of Macchiarini's recruitment in 2010. He was soon joined by the institution's vice chancellor, who had cleared Macchiarini of scientific misconduct despite the blatant evidence against him. Karolinska then ended their affiliation with Macchiarini entirely, but this was already long after people started dying. It seems that Macchiarini had been given special treatment at every turn, perhaps due to his smooth-talking demeanor, or perhaps because his growing status as a celebrity made it difficult for people to question him. The brightest stars often blind people. Macchiarini was as close to superstardom as a doctor can get. As his fame grew, it was impossible to stop his momentum. He had a strong base of supporters who were willing to defend him even after his patients died. But those supporters eventually disappeared. Macchiarini was forced to face the consequences of his actions, disgraced and alone. It was not long after the rug was pulled out from under Macchiarini's life that the legal proceedings began. In June of 2016, Swedish authorities investigated Macchiarini for involuntary manslaughter. 7 people died. All of them had been operated on by Macchiarini shortly before their passing. All of them had died from complications that could be directly connected to Macchiarini's unproven plastic tracheas. The case seems pretty cut and dry, right? Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. Prosecutors found it extremely difficult to prove Macchiarini was legally responsible for his patient's passing. Well, it seems pretty obvious to anyone paying attention that the celebrity doctor had a hand in it. It was hard to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Macchiarini killed those people and not their underlying diseases. Charges were dropped in 2017, but the legal troubles only just beginning. In 2019, Macchiarini was sentenced to 16 months in an Italian prison for abuse of office and forging documents. The grieving families of Macchiarini's victims wanted the doctor locked up for good. The verdict in Italian court wasn't exactly what they had in mind, but at least it was something. In September of 2020, Macchiarini was indicted for aggravated assault after Swedish authorities had reopened their case against him. After new pieces of evidence were obtained, prosecutors believed they had enough to charge him. Macchiarini has continued to proclaim his innocence, but those claims have fallen on deaf ears. To the people he hurt, he is public enemy number 1, and they will stop at nothing to make sure he's held responsible for his reckless behavior. It's been a wild fall from grace for the man once seen as the potential savior of the human race. The discoveries he claimed to have made in regenerative medicine were supposed to open up all new possibilities for how doctors treat patients with incurable health issues. But, like everything else in his life, that was all a lie. Once the facade crumbled, the whole tower came down. Macchiarini went from a beloved miracle worker to infamous fraud in a matter of months. What awaits him in criminal court? We'll have to wait and see. Click here to watch one of these next videos.